Liz, and today I'm going to be modeling for you guys how to monitor your own comprehension while you're reading. So the comprehension strategy that I'm going to model today is called read, write, and talk. Basically in this strategy, you can use it for when you're reading poetry or an informational text or a nonfiction text or an article. Basically what you do is as you're reading this piece of text, you stop every time you read something that provokes a thought in your mind, and you just jot something down along the side in the margins, and it helps you to more fully comprehend and remember the information you read because you're focusing less on details and you're focusing more on what is this piece of text about. The piece of text that I chose to use for my strategy today to model is Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken. I really like this poem. I've read it before. I think it's a good piece to use for this strategy. So what I'm going to be using other than the poem today is I have a pen, which I'm going to use to jot down notes in the margins as I read whenever something comes into mind. And it doesn't have to just be a thought. It can be questions you have if you're confused, if your schema is activated, if it reminds you of something that you have done in the past or that you already know. You can jot down if you make connections to things like that, and then just any reactions that you have with the text. And then I also added a little bit to the strategy. I'm using a green highlighter, and I'm going to highlight any words that I don't know that I'm going to have to go back and look up or ask somebody what they mean after I read this text. Okay. So now I'm going to actually model this strategy, read, write, and talk, for you guys. So before I start, again, I make sure I have my pen to jot down my notes on the side. I would recommend using a colored pen because if you use black on black, it might be a little just confusing, like too much black ink everywhere. And then I have my highlighter to highlight words that I come across that are confusing, and then I also have my poem. So I'll start off with the first stanza, and the first line is, "Two roads diverged in a yellow wood." I don't know what diverged means, so I'm going to take my green highlighter and highlight the word diverged so you can see that better. But I know what a wood is, and I know what two roads are. So down beside that line, I'm going to make a note, because in my head I have a picture of these two roads in the woods. So like dirt roads, not paved roads. So I'm just going to make a note there about that. So I wrote picture and then two dirt roads in the woods. So then whenever I go back and look, I can see what my thoughts were at that point when I read that line. Okay, so now that I've read and modeled my thoughts during this first line of the first stanza, I'm going to continue reading, and I'm only going to stop if I have a thought or a question or any sort of thought that I feel like I need to write down through the rest of the stanza. I'm going to reread the first line though, just so it makes a little bit more sense, but remember we already did that one. So as the poem goes on, it goes, "Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both." Why can't he travel both? Do you think maybe time? Maybe he doesn't have enough time? Maybe it's getting dark out? So I'm going to write that down because I'm confused why he can't go down both of these roads. So I just wrote that down right under the first thing I had. And I have a question mark, and then why not both? Because why can't he go down both of the roads? So as I keep reading, "And be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth." So now that I finished this stanza, the picture that I had in my head changed a bit. It's not just two roads in the woods, I'm picturing two like splitting, like a Y. So then if I go back and think, diverged must mean either like splitting this way or splitting that way, so it has to mean something along those lines. So I'm just going to make a note of that too. Now I'm picturing a man standing in the woods looking where these two dirt roads split away from him. sorry, that took a bit to write. So then I have picture again, and then 2 roads splitting in the woods with a man looking down them. So that ends the first stanza. So then I'm going to keep going, and as I start reading the second stanza, it goes, then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim. Those first 2 lines don't really make sense to me, so I'm just going to put a big question mark beside them, because that doesn't really make much sense if you just read it like that. So I just put a question mark there. Okay, so as I keep reading, it goes, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. Oh, okay, well that makes more sense now. It just means that both of the paths were very worn down and like beaten, like they'd been walked on a lot. And one of them was just a little bit less beaten than the other. So I'm gonna take my pen and I'm gonna jot that down too. So now if we go back, you guys can see that so far I've gone through the first and the second stanza. I found one word that I wasn't really sure about, and then I have my thoughts jotted down over here on this side. Okay, so now that I've gone through and read and modeled my, monitoring my own comprehension throughout the first 2 stanzas of this poem, I'm going to go and continue and read the third and the fourth one. I'm just going to verbally say what I'm doing, and then I'll show you at the end what my final completed strategy looks like. So as I start with the third stanza, starts off, and both that morning equally lay, and leaves no step had trodden black. I don't really know what the word trodden means, so I'm going to take my highlighter, and I'm going to highlight that word. So maybe as I keep reading, it'll explain it a little bit more. I would assume that it had something to do with the fact that the paths are like beaten and worn down, but I'm not positive. So if I don't find out in the rest of the poem, I'll have to ask somebody that I know. So going on, the next line is, oh, I kept the first for another day. Oh, so I'm assuming that the writer of this poem has chosen a path to go down. That's what that line means to me. So I'm gonna make a note of that too. So I just wrote, I think he chose a path. So that's good. Yeah, he chose a path, because that seemed like the dilemma in the beginning of the poem. So going on, the rest of this stanza goes, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. Oh, well that's kind of sad. I guess this is like a big decision of which path he goes down. So I'm going to make a note of that because he thinks once he chooses a path, he's not going to get a chance to go back down the other one. That sounds pretty important. Okay, so that was the third stanza, and now on to the fourth one. It starts off and he says, I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. So I guess this already happened, or he's either writing it as it's happening and he's going to be telling us later. I'm not really sure, so I'm going to put a question mark there and say, when is this poem being told? So as I go on to read, he says, 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Oh, okay. Well, that kind of answers my confusion earlier on why this was such an important path in the woods to walk down. He must not actually be talking about a path in the woods. He's probably talking about like a life decision. That's kind of what that sounds like to me. Since it made all the difference. Seems like something pretty important happened in his life. And that also kind of answers my other question of when is he telling this story? If he knows that he chose his path and it made all the difference, it must have already happened. So this must be him telling us at a later date. So I'm going to answer my question on my poem, and I'm going to make some more notes there too. So here you can see that I went through and I read the last 2 stanzas and all of my notes that I told you guys that I made while I was reading it. Trodden is highlighted green because I didn't understand. I found out that he chose a path, which is cool. It was a pretty important decision. And then down here at the end, I put, I don't think that he was talking about a path in the woods, because I don't know how important choosing a path in the woods would be if it made all the difference. So this is what I have. This is what the end of my strategy looked like. Okay, so if this strategy was being used in a classroom, after the students had read through the poem, made all their notes, highlighted their words that they didn't understand, they would then get together with a partner. And this is the read, write, and then talk. This is the talk portion. We read it, we wrote, and then you group up and you talk to somebody. And you discuss what questions you had. Maybe the person you're talking to understood the words that you didn't understand. If not, you can look them up, dictionary, Google, ask your teacher, that sort of thing. And then this just gets the students to talk, and they'll start to realize how important it is to monitor your own comprehension when you're reading, because it really does help you to understand. Because like I said at the beginning of the video, you're not only focusing on the details, you're focusing on what's the story about, the big picture, and then how it makes you feel. So now you know how to use the strategy read, write, and talk to monitor your own comprehension while you're reading. So now you can go out and give it a try.